Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The White House is moving to greatly expand the Department of Homeland Security's authority to deport millions of undocumented immigrants and to increase the number of Immigration and Border Patrol agents by 15,000. Under the rules issued Tuesday, almost any undocumented person in the country could be detained and deported, even if they've never committed a crime. A traffic violation or mere suspicion of committing a crime could now be grounds for deportation. Any immigrant who cannot prove they've been in the United States for over 2 years could be deported without a hearing. The memos also call for the prosecution of parents who seek to reunite their family by using smugglers to bring their children into the country. According to the White House, protections will remain in place for dreamers, at least for now, immigrants who came to the United States as children and have since received permission to live and work in the United States under President Obama's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program known as DACA, although a dreamer was just arrested last week. The Trump administration's crackdown against immigration and immigrants currently living in the United States has sparked widespread protest. Only hours after the Department of Homeland Security unveiled its deportation plans, activists unfurled a 3 feet by 20 feet banner at the base of the Statue of Liberty, reading, "Refugees Welcome." Last Thursday, thousands of immigrants closed their businesses, refused to go to work, and kept their children home from school for a Day Without Immigrants protests in San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Phoenix, Chicago, Atlanta, Detroit, Raleigh, Charlotte, Austin, and other cities. Media reports now say as many as 100 immigrants lost their jobs after taking part in the protests, including construction and restaurant workers. The owner of JVS Masonry in Commerce City, Colorado, fired 30 bricklayers, even though they told their boss ahead of time that they planned to skip work to participate in the protests. We'll have more on the Department of Homeland Security memos after headlines. President Trump has spoken out against anti-Semitism after widespread criticism over his failure to condemn the waves of bomb threats against Jewish community centers and other attacks against the Jewish community since his inauguration. On Tuesday, Trump called anti-Semitism horrible and painful at the end of his tour of the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C.
The anti-Semitic threats targeting our Jewish community and community centers are horrible and are painful and a very sad reminder of the work that still must be done to root out hate and prejudice and evil.
President Trump's comments came as several Jewish community centers, or JCCs, were temporarily evacuated Monday after receiving bomb threats. In total, 69 threats have been reported against 54 JCCs since inauguration. Meanwhile, a Muslim-led fundraiser has raised more than $50,000 to help repair the Jewish cemetery in University City, Missouri, where the grave sites of more than 100 Jews were vandalized over the weekend. Many are calling Trump's comments too little, too late. In a statement, the Anne Frank Center for Mutual Respect said, quote, "The president's sudden acknowledgement is a Band-Aid on the cancer of anti-Semitism that's infected his own administration," unquote. We'll have more on Trump's comments with the director of the Anne Frank Center, as well as Mark Potok of the Southern Poverty Law Center, later in the broadcast. In North Dakota, Lakota water protectors fighting the $3.8 billion Dakota Access Pipeline have vowed to make a treaty stand today to resist their forcible eviction from the main Oceti-Sakowin resistance camp. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the North Dakota governor have imposed a noon eviction deadline today for the hundreds of water protectors still living at the resistance camp. The government has warned that after 2 p.m., state and federal agents will begin arresting people who remain. Water protectors say the resistance camp sits on unceded Sioux territory under the 1851 Treaty of Fort Laramie and that they have a right to remain on their ancestral land. These are some of the Lakota women at the encampment.
I am Sichungu Lakota, and this is my treaty territory.
I am Oglala Lakota, and this is my treaty territory.
I am Ohe-Nupa Lakota, and this is my treaty territory.
But after the deadline of February 22nd, 2017, at 2 p.m.,
we are all at risk
of facing arrests, police brutality, federal charges, and prison time.
Across the country, Republican lawmakers were confronted by thousands of angry constituents at town hall meetings and events Tuesday, as voters demanding the Republicans take action to challenge President Trump. Iowa Republican Senators Chuck Grassley and Joni Ernst, Florida Congressman Dennis Ross, Tennessee Republican Congressmember Marsha Blackburn, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell were all confronted by voters frustrated by Trump's policies on immigration, education, and jobs, his refusal to release his tax returns, his inclusion of white nationalists in his administration, among other issues. Some voters asked whether the lawmakers would support Trump's impeachment. This is one woman challenging Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell during a town hall meeting on Tuesday.
The last I heard, these coal jobs are not coming back, and now these people don't have the insurance they need because they're poor. And they work those coal mines, and they're sick. The veterans are sick. The veterans are broken down. They're not getting what they need. If you can answer any of that, I'll sit down and shut up like Elizabeth Warren.
The woman was referencing Senator Elizabeth Warren's reading of Coretta Scott King's 1986 letter against Jeff Sessions during a debate over his confirmation as Attorney General. Senator Warren was silenced and rebuked by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell for reading the letter. In response to the wave of resistance against Republican lawmakers, President Trump tweeted, "The so-called angry crowds and home districts of some Republicans are actually, in numerous cases, planned out by liberal activists. Sad!" exclamation point. CIA analyst and National Security Council spokesman Edward Price has resigned over his opposition to President Trump. In an article published in the Washington Post headlined, "I didn't think I'd ever leave the CIA, but because of Trump, I quit." Price calls Trump's actions disturbing. He writes the final straw for him was watching the National Security Council be reorganized to demote and give the Trump's chief strategist and former Breitbart leader, Stephen Bannon, a full seat on the Principals Committee. This is Price.
If this administration decides to go it alone and to say, with intelligence be damned, I think there's a real consequence for escalation on any number of fronts, and an escalation that has the potential to put lives at risk.
Price was concerned about the demoting of the generals and the elevating of the former Breitbart News chief, Steve Bannon. The U.S. Supreme Court began hearing arguments Tuesday in the case of the 15-year-old Mexican teenager who was shot dead by a U.S. Border Patrol agent who fired across the border in 2010, and whether the boy's parents have the right to sue in U.S. courts, even though the bullet struck the boy in Mexico. Teenager Sergio Adrian Hernandez Guareca was playing with his friends on the Mexican side of the border that separates El Paso, Texas from Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, when Border Patrol agent Jesus Mesa fired across the border into Mexico, killing Hernandez. The Supreme Court justices appear to be split, meaning the court may hold on to the case and reschedule a new hearing after a ninth justice is confirmed. The ruling could impact at least some of the 6 other cases where U.S. agents have killed Mexican citizens by shooting across the border. In international news, Palestinians have expressed outrage at the short sentence given to an Israeli soldier caught on tape executing a wounded Palestinian man. On Tuesday, a military panel sentenced Israeli Sergeant Elor Azaria to 18 months in prison and a demotion in rank. Video of the killing last March shows Palestinian Abdel Fattah al-Sharif lying immobilized on the ground as Azaria fires a single shot into the man's head at close range. The killing took place in Hebron in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. The father of al-Sharif said, quote, "If someone is arrested for throwing a rock, they get a 2-year sentence. In this case, a soldier murdered and got a 1.5 years. This is Wassel Abu Youssef of the Palestine Liberation Organization.
Today's sentencing for the murder of the martyr Abd al-Fattah al-Sharif, who was murdered by one of the occupation's fascist soldiers, a murder that was filmed and broadcast on most of the world's satellite channels. This deliberate murder of a wounded person who was not able to move and was shot in the head and killed in cold blood. Today, a fake court decided to hand down a light sentence to this soldier, which illustrates a disrespect of Palestinian lives and international laws.
A British Muslim school teacher is speaking out after he says he was denied entry into the United States during a school trip last week, even though Trump's travel ban had been suspended and the teacher is a British citizen who was born in Wales. Juhel Mia says he was removed from the plane at Reykjavik Airport in Iceland on February 16th.
I was in shock. I couldn't believe it was happening. It hit me the hardest when I looked back and I could see all the kids looking at me, all the members of staff, and as I was going through the plane, it felt like everyone else on the plane were looking at me as if I was a threat to them or I would harm them in any way. So I felt powerless. I felt like I'm being targeted, and I had no idea why, and there was nothing I could do.
He was taken away even though he was escorting all of his students onto the plane. Back in the United States, a federal judge has blocked Texas from defunding Planned Parenthood. Judge Sam Sparks issued an injunction in favor of the women's health care organization after Texas tried to cut off Medicaid funding for non-abortion services to Planned Parenthood. Texas had falsely and unsuccessfully accused Planned Parenthood of selling fetal tissue, drawing on heavily edited and widely discredited anti-choice videos as evidence. The ruling makes Texas the sixth state where courts have blocked efforts to defund Planned Parenthood at the state level. And while white nationalist Milo Yiannopoulos has resigned from Breitbart amidst widespread outrage over his comments appearing to endorse pedophilia. On Tuesday, Yiannopoulos announced his resignation at a news conference here in New York City.
My employer, Breitbart News, has stood by me while others caved. They've allowed me to carry conservative and libertarian ideas to communities that would otherwise never have had them. They have been a significant factor in my success, and I'm grateful for the freedom and for the friendships that I forged there. But I would be wrong to allow my poor choice of words to detract from my colleagues' important job, which is why today I'm resigning from Breitbart effective immediately.
Milo Yiannopoulos' resignation comes after Simon & Schuster canceled the publication of his book Dangerous, and the American Conservative Union rescinded an invitation to speak at the upcoming annual CPAC conference over his comments discrediting age of consent laws and promoting relationships between younger boys and older men.
This arbitrary and oppressive idea of consent, which totally destroys, the understanding that many of us have of the complexities and subtleties and complicated nature of many relationships. Some of the most important, enriching, and incredibly, life-affirming, important, shaping relationships, very often between younger boys and older men, can be hugely positive experiences for those young boys.
Milo Yiannopoulos has long faced opposition led by women of color and transgender activists over his history of making racist, sexist, and xenophobic statements. At the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, for example, he outed and mocked a transgender student showing her name and photo on screen in December. Best-selling author Roxane Gay, who canceled her book deal in January with Simon & Schuster in protest of its now-canceled deal with Yiannopoulos, wrote, quote, "As someone who endured a bit of his harassment, it's breathtaking in its scope, intensity, and cruelty," unquote. She said she will still not publish her upcoming book with Simon & Schuster, saying the publisher, quote, "should have never enabled Milo in the first place." And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.